What secrets lie behind the walls of the most famous house in America? How many times has it been rebuilt, repainted, and reshaped to reflect the power inside it? And what happens when a new president decides to change it once again, tearing down the West Wing itself to make room for a grand new ballroom? From fires and wars to secret tunnels and midnight meetings, the White House has witnessed everything, from births and funerals to the making of history itself. Tonight, we'll explore the entire history of the White House. Before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this kind of quiet storytelling truly helps you relax and unwind. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. I really enjoy reading what you write, and it's comforting to see people from all around the world gathering here, slowly winding down side by side, even though we're far apart. Now, make yourself comfortable, dim the lights, and if you'd like, switch on a fan or a little white noise for that steady background hum that helps the world fade away. Let your breathing slow, let your body relax, and together we'll drift into tonight's story at an easy, gentle pace.
Chapter 1. The Cornerstone Mystery and Laborers Who Built the Walls. The new American Republic didn't have a permanent capital city yet. Where to put it was a huge political disagreement. This question was finally settled by a deal called the Compromise of 1790. It wasn't easy to agree on a location. Alexander Hamilton needed votes from the South for his financial plan. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison wanted the capital far away from northern cities. They wanted it built in the southern region. The solution placed the federal district along the Potomac River. President George Washington got to pick the exact spot for the capital. Washington strongly believed the new city should be the nation's center. He personally oversaw the selection of the grounds. The area was carved from land given by both Maryland and Virginia. The land Washington chose had its issues. Much of the site was reportedly swampy. The terrain wasn't level in many places. The summers were often hot and quite humid. But the location offered great political balance. It was meant to calm tensions between the North and the South. The president's house would sit on slightly higher, elevated ground. This site offered better views of the Potomac River. It also helped with drainage problems. The federal government had a strict deadline. It had to move to the new capital by November 1st, 1800. Building a major public house in just 10 years was an extremely demanding timeline. Since the presidency was a new concept, no one knew what the president's house should look like. So, in 1792, the commissioners held an architectural contest. They asked architects to send in their plans. The house needed to look important enough to show the nation's dignity, but it couldn't be so grand that it suggested America had a king. The winner would receive $500 or a medal. Thomas Jefferson loved architecture and sent in a design anonymously. His plan wasn't chosen. Other proposals that looked like European palaces were rejected right away. The winning plan was submitted by James Hoban. He was an architect born in Ireland who was working in South Carolina. Hoban's design struck the perfect balance the nation needed. It was substantial, but still restrained. Hoban's neoclassical design was inspired by Leinster House in Dublin. Washington approved the plan. He wanted the house to be even larger than Hoban's first drawing showed. After winning, Hoban became the superintendent for the construction project. Building officially started on October 13th, 1792. A Masonic ceremony was held on that day. The cornerstone was laid then. The men who placed the stone were all brothers in the secretive Freemasons organization. Masons traditionally lay the stone in the northeast corner of a building. but one document suggests this stone was laid in the southwest corner. The cornerstone was incredibly important. It wasn't just functional. It was symbolic of the new American government. Descriptions of the stone vary a bit. It's said to have been a large, substantial stone. Experts calculate the stone weighed around 3,600 pounds. That's about the same weight as a small car. A brass plaque may have been placed beneath the heavy stone. This plaque would have listed the people who attended the ceremony. It may have also held a blessing for the new government. Some early cornerstones were hollowed out. They held a container, like a time capsule. It's possible the White House stone held landmark documents of great, unimagined wisdom. The very first stone vanished the day after it was placed. It just disappeared. No one has seen the White House cornerstone for more than 200 years. Its disappearance became a famous historical mystery. Presidents later searched for the missing stone. Harry Truman, who was a high-ranking Mason, even used a mine detector to look for it. They never found it. Some people believe the Masons themselves stole the stone. They suggest the Masons took it because they thought it gave them some kind of power. The Masons, however, always deny any involvement. Given the immense size and weight of the stone, it couldn't have easily been carried away. It would have left a giant scar on the ground if someone had dragged it. The evidence points to the stone not moving off the White House grounds. It's possible the cornerstone was actually deliberately hidden. America was a brand new country at that time. Its leaders feared the British would return to take back the colonies. Perhaps the Masons put the cornerstone where no one would ever find it. Most people believe it's still buried deep under the existing foundation. It keeps us wondering and searching. The outer walls of the president's house were constructed using light-colored sandstone. This durable stone came from quarries located at Aquia Creek in Virginia. The stone blocks were rough and extremely heavy. They traveled approximately 40 miles to the site. The large blocks moved first by water, then were hauled over land. Skilled stone cutters shaped the rough material precisely on site. The construction effort was massive and lasted 8 long years. The workforce was diverse and had different legal statuses. It included free-skilled craftsmen. Many of these skilled workers were immigrants. They came from places like Scotland and Ireland. But the project also relied heavily on enslaved people. Enslaved individuals performed constant, demanding physical labor. They dug the foundations. They helped raise the heavy original stone walls. The work was dangerous and physically exhausting. Some enslaved people were skilled craftsmen themselves. They worked as masons and carpenters alongside free workers. The federal government paid the enslaved workers' owners for their time and labor. The enslaved individuals themselves received no compensation. Free African-American laborers also contributed their skills to the building. The White House stands as a strong symbol of freedom and democracy. It's important to remember that enslaved people were instrumental in building its foundation and walls. This reality is a contradiction deeply embedded in the nation's founding. The construction was slow, difficult, and built through the labor of people seeking opportunity and people forced into servitude. Chapter 2. First Occupancy, Adams' Cold House, and Jefferson's Terraces. The building of the President's house had been extremely slow. Construction had stretched on for 8 long years. The federal government was scheduled to move from Philadelphia to the new capital in November 1800. The timeline was driven by a law called the Residence Act. It wasn't based on whether the building was actually ready. President George Washington oversaw the planning. However, he passed away before the house was finished. Washington never actually lived there. John Adams was the next president after Washington. Adams and his wife, Abigail, were the first occupants of the mansion. In November 1800, Adams became the first president to sleep in the new house. The building was huge. It was an imposing structure meant to project dignity and power. At 28,000 square feet, it was the largest home in the country at the time. The floor plan for Washington's house endures with few changes even today. From the outside, the house looked substantial and impressive. The stone walls stood, and the roof was on. It was originally referred to as the President's House or the President's Palace, but when the Adams family moved in, the house was far from complete. They moved into what was essentially an active construction site. Only a handful of the rooms were fully furnished. Many rooms were incomplete or completely unfurnished. The house wasn't ready for its residents. The massive space lacked insulation. It had no central heating or running water. The house was cold and drafty, especially in the damp Washington winter. Only fireplaces were available for heat. The few working fireplaces struggled to warm the vast interior spaces. Abigail Adams found the house uncomfortable and difficult to keep warm. She wrote letters describing the cold and the unfinished rooms. Her accounts give us a valuable idea of what the house was like during that first winter. The house felt cavernous and incomplete. The East Room, which was designed as the largest room for public gatherings, was totally unfinished. It lacked plaster and paint. Abigail famously used this enormous space to hang the family's laundry because there wasn't a proper drying area. The main staircase was functional but still lacked its decorative railings. Furniture was hard to come by. Some pieces came from Philadelphia, but there wasn't enough for the many rooms. Adams only occupied the house for about 4 months. He left Washington quickly after losing the election to Thomas Jefferson in March 1801. Adams' time in the building was brief and mostly unsatisfying. Before he left, Adams wrote a prayer for the house. He wished that heaven would bestow its best blessings on the house. He also hoped that only honest and wise men would inhabit it hereafter. Thomas Jefferson was the third president. He became the second to live in the president's house. Jefferson took office in March 1801. He was deeply interested in architecture. He had even submitted an anonymous design in the original competition. His design wasn't chosen, but his interest shaped his time in the house. When Jefferson moved in, the house was still incomplete. The interior finishing work was just slowly continuing. Jefferson took an active interest in completing the building. He worked on finishing interior spaces. The East Room finally received its plaster and paint during his administration. Other rooms were gradually finished and furnished. Over Jefferson's 8 years in residence, the house became much more functional and complete. He also addressed some of the heating problems from the Adams occupancy. The house became more comfortable and livable. Jefferson's most significant contribution was the development of the East and West Terraces. These additions extended out from the main house. They created covered walkways. They also added extra space for service and storage needs. The East and West Terraces are sometimes called colonnades. The design of the terraces was inspired by classical architecture, reflecting Jefferson's European travels. Jefferson's additions improved the building's visual look. They made the house appear more connected to the surrounding landscape. Jefferson was uncomfortable with excessive formality. He preferred more accessible interactions with people. He used the grand space more informally than many later presidents. He modified some interior rooms to suit his intellectual interests. Jefferson was fascinated by natural history. He kept collections of specimens, maps, and scientific instruments there. He also introduced indoor innovations, like a revolving bookstand. The house became a working hub for his political and intellectual pursuits. Jefferson was interested in landscape design. He wanted the president's house to sit in appropriate surroundings. He worked on improving the immediate grounds. Trees were planted and paths were laid out. The site gradually looked more like a designed landscape and less like a construction zone. During Jefferson's time, the capital city itself slowly developed. The president's house was no longer isolated in the wilderness. The city George Washington envisioned started to take physical form. By the time Jefferson left office in 1809, the president's house was substantially more complete. The interior rooms were finished. The terraces added function and architectural beauty. The house began to exist in an actual urban context. The building was closer to James Hoban's original vision. Jefferson's tenure proved that the house would continuously evolve. Each new president would make changes driven by their needs and personal tastes. In 1809, James Madison became the fourth president. He and his wife, Dolley Madison, moved in. Dolley Madison helped shape the house's social life by hosting many formal events and receptions. She started defining the role of the First Lady. Under the Madison administration, the White House became a center of Washington society. The house continued its slow, steady evolution. The early years of the White House were a reflection of America's attempt to define itself. It stood as a modest political statement. It was a house for a president, not a king. The foundation laid in those first years prepared the house for all that would follow. Chapter 3. The Burning of 1814, Dolley Madison's Rescue, and the White Exterior. By 1812, America was involved in a serious conflict with Great Britain. This conflict is known as the War of 1812. Tensions between the two nations had escalated for some time. The young American military wasn't fully prepared for the severity of the conflict. The war created immense worry within the new capital city of Washington. In August of 1814, British forces advanced toward Washington. They defeated American troops at the Battle of Bladensburg. This loss left the capital city almost completely unprotected. President James Madison and his administration were forced to receive warnings about the approaching troops. The British attack was intended as revenge. The year before, American forces had burned government buildings in York, Canada. The attack on Washington became a real possibility. President Madison and his cabinet had to flee the city. But First Lady Dolley Madison didn't rush to leave. She showed extraordinary courage during those final, chaotic hours. Dolley Madison understood the immense symbolic value of the house's contents. She worked to save important documents and historical items before she finally evacuated. Her actions have become a treasured part of White House history. She reportedly oversaw the removal of important state papers. These papers included copies of the Declaration of Independence and other essential documents. Dolley Madison also made a critical decision regarding a famous piece of art. It was the large, full-length portrait of George Washington. The painting was by Gilbert Stuart. This portrait hung in the state dining room. It was far too large to be removed easily. The frame had to be cracked open or broken. The canvas was then removed from its stretcher and rolled up. It was taken away in a wagon to a safe location in the countryside. The items Dolley Madison saved were more than just property. They were powerful symbols of the nation's history and continuity. Her quick thinking demonstrated her understanding of their importance. The rescued Washington portrait remains in the White House collection today. It has continuously hung in the house since its original opening in 1800. Dolley Madison has long been credited as a great heroine of the war. Dolley Madison finally fled just in time. The British forces entered the president's house shortly after she left. Contemporary accounts suggest the soldiers found the house ready for dinner. Food and wine were reportedly still on the table. The British officers supposedly ate the prepared meal before they began destroying the building. The destruction was thorough and deliberate. The British intended to burn down the house completely. They used flammable materials to make sure the fire was extensive. The soldiers threw flaming javelins through the windows. Lieutenant Pratt reportedly fired his pistol to signal the beginning of the conflagration. The wooden interior structure caught fire quickly. Floors, roof, framing, and everything combustible began to burn intensely. The whole interior of the building was gutted. The house glowed brightly in the night. One witness, William Thornton, said the president's house glowed like a great plum cake. The fire consumed all the furniture and interior finishes. The huge timbers in the attic and roof burned through the floor. The burned wreckage then crashed down to the basement. The massive house was reduced to a shell filled with burnt ashes. The fire was so hot that it cracked some of the exterior stone walls. The sandstone walls, however, survived the intense heat. Stone doesn't burn, so the walls remained standing. They were badly damaged and blackened by smoke, but they stood. The survival of these exterior walls was extremely important. It meant rebuilding didn't require starting from nothing. The destruction also extended to the terraces that Thomas Jefferson had added. The wooden elements of those structures burned, and some parts collapsed. Other government buildings were burned the same night. This included the Capitol building, where the House and Senate chambers were destroyed. A thunderstorm eventually moved through the area. The heavy rain helped to put out the remaining fires. The storm may also have convinced the British commanders to quickly withdraw from Washington. When President Madison and other officials returned to the city, they found a ruin. The president's house was completely uninhabitable. The Madisons had to move to temporary quarters. One place they lived was the Octagon House. Some people suggested moving the capital to a different city. Perhaps they should move it back to Philadelphia. But the decision was made to rebuild right there in Washington. Rebuilding the president's house was considered an absolute necessity. It would be a powerful symbol of American resilience. It would show that the nation would not be defeated or intimidated by the British. James Hoban, the original architect, was called back to lead the reconstruction. His knowledge of the original design made him the perfect person for the job. He would essentially rebuild his own creation. Hoban worked with the remaining exterior walls as the structural base. Reconstruction began in earnest in 1815. The project took about 3 years. The house was ready to be occupied again by late 1817. Hoban first had to assess the damage. The walls were smoke damaged and cracked. The stone needed attention beyond simple structural repair. The paint covered the discoloration from the smoke damage. This practical decision gave the house a clean, uniform appearance. The house had originally been built using light-colored sandstone from Aquia Creek. This stone naturally had a tan or light brown color. The exterior walls were this natural color when the building was first completed. The transformation to white occurred during the reconstruction after the fire. Whitewashing or painting stone buildings was a common practice back then. It helped protect the stone from the weather. It also created a uniform look when stones varied in color. The choice to paint the house white was mostly practical. It covered the fire damage and the smoke stains. Workers removed about 32 coats of old paint during later renovations. Beneath the layers, they found the burn marks from the fire. These black burn marks still exist today on the original sandstone structure in the basement. The exterior was sealed with a wash. This wash was made from salt, rice, and glue. Out of simple necessity, the builders created the first layer of paint that would forever define the house. The use of white paint gave the president's house a new look. The color suggested renewal after the fire's destruction. The white appearance has been maintained consistently ever since. The building had become a white structure. This simple nickname, the White House, began to appear informally in correspondence and newspapers. The informal name distinguished it from the Capitol building. It was simple and memorable. In official documents, it was still called the President's House or the Executive Mansion. But the building had acquired a descriptive new name. The rebuilding efforts were substantial. Workers rebuilt the interior from the ground up. The wooden framing, floors, and stairs were all replaced. The new construction replicated what had been burned. James Hoban made some minor improvements based on lessons learned. But the basic design was exactly the same. When the house was finished, President James Monroe and his family moved in. Monroe was the first president to occupy the fully restored house. The restoration of the president's house was a huge achievement. It demonstrated the nation's determination and capability. The rebuilt house symbolized the young nation's resilience. Chapter 4. Completing the design, adding the iconic porticos. The president's house had been badly damaged by fire in 1814. The British attack had gutted the interior. James Hoban, the original architect, was brought back to oversee the rebuilding. Hoban used the surviving exterior walls as his foundation for the restoration. The reconstruction effort was swift and determined. The house was rebuilt using congressional money. The new construction recreated the original design, but the interior was all new. The wooden framing, floors, and stairs had to be replaced entirely. It was a powerful symbol of American resilience. The restoration was nearly complete by late 1817. President James Monroe and his family moved into the fully restored house. The new furnishings came from France, helping to restore the dignity of the presidency. Monroe was the first president to live in the house after the reconstruction. Even after the interior was rebuilt, the structure wasn't completely finished. Hoban's original design had included important architectural elements that still hadn't been built. These were the iconic porticos, the columned porches that defined the neoclassical style. These porticos were essential to James Hoban's vision. The south portico was the first to be added. It was built in 1824 during James Monroe's presidency. The south portico faces the grounds and the south lawn. It's a semicircular, columned porch. This addition gave the southern face of the house its distinctive rounded form. The south portico was modeled after classical European architecture. It greatly enhanced the building's formal look and symmetry. It also provided a sheltered outdoor space accessible from the main floor rooms. This meant the first family could enjoy the grounds more easily. Hoban oversaw the construction of the south portico himself. Following the addition of the south portico, the building still needed one last major element. This was the north portico, which faces Pennsylvania Avenue. This columned entrance was finally completed in 1829. It was finished during the administration of President Andrew Jackson. Jackson, who was known as a populist, brought dramatic changes to the house and the presidency. The north portico completed the building's north facade. It finished the house as Hoban had originally envisioned it. The north portico created a far more impressive entrance sequence. Both porticos were built using Hoban's original design concepts. The addition of these classical porches enhanced the White House's look and function. With both the north and south porticos complete, the house finally achieved its full neoclassical design. It now had the dignity and permanence that George Washington had requested. It was officially the completed President's House. The name White House was still just a descriptive nickname at this time. The completion of the house coincided with a period of changing political culture. Andrew Jackson wanted the White House to reflect the voice of the people. He invited thousands of people to his inauguration party. This massive gathering led to some chaos and damage inside the mansion. Jackson still made practical renovations while he was there. He installed both running water and new heating systems. This helped address some of the persistent problems from the early years of the house. The house was becoming more comfortable and modern as new technologies became available. Technological improvements were a constant theme in the White House during the 1900s. The original fireplaces were eventually joined by central heating systems. This made the house much more comfortable during the cold winter months. During this same period, gas lighting was installed. Gas replaced candles and oil lamps as the main way to light the rooms. The gas system required pipes throughout the building and fixtures in the rooms. This provided much better and more reliable lighting. Gas lighting was essential for formal events held in the evening. Gas lighting would be replaced later, but it was a major step forward. The White House saw a gradual expansion of its grounds and gardens. First ladies often took a personal interest in the landscape. During the presidency of John Quincy Adams, the focus shifted to outdoor improvements. Adams was known as the astronomer president because of his love of science. He directed the planting of many trees and flower beds. The surrounding landscape slowly turned into a more designed space. By the 1840s, the house looked much more impressive than the unfinished structure John Adams first moved into. The house continued to function as the president's residence and the nation's center for political and social life. During the next decades, the White House also became a space for consolidating executive power. President James K. Polk used the House to discuss the expansionist policies of Manifest Destiny. He met with advisors in the Oval Room to talk about annexing Texas and the war with Mexico. The building was used to strengthen the authority of the presidency. In the 1840s, the House also received expanded plumbing systems. Running water was gradually installed, replacing the simpler original systems. Installing indoor plumbing improved sanitation and overall convenience greatly. The president's house had evolved from a construction site to a fully realized neoclassical mansion. The addition of the porticos completed the architectural vision set by James Hoban and George Washington. The structure was now a symbol of order, permanence, and dignity for the young republic. The White House was continually adapting to the needs of the presidents and the nation. It was a solid building now, having survived fire and war. This stability would soon be tested again by rising national turmoil and the coming conflict over slavery. The porticos stood as a beautiful, strong, finished frame for the intense drama that was about to unfold inside its walls. Chapter 5, The House Sanctified, Lincoln and the Civil War Crisis. The mid-1800s were a time of great division for the young nation. Tensions over the issue of slavery had been building for many decades. These deep conflicts soon echoed through the halls of the White House. The building was a home for presidents, but it was also the epicenter of a growing divided republic. It had already seen celebration and scandal, unity and division, while expanding alongside the nation. President Millard Fillmore tried hard to keep the peace. He supported the Compromise of 1850, hoping to ease tensions between the regions. This made the White House a place where uneasy compromises were worked out. However, this peace didn't last long. Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan were the next two presidents to live in the House. Both men struggled to control the rising national turmoil. During their terms, Southern states grew more defiant. At the same time, abolitionists who wanted to end slavery grew more determined. The White House saw many debates and petitions that hinted at the conflict that was coming. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president. His election immediately caused Southern states to secede from the Union. Lincoln arrived in Washington under high security. There were already serious fears that he might be assassinated. Soon after he arrived, the Civil War erupted in 1861. The White House quickly transformed into a fortress. It was suddenly surrounded by troops. Lincoln used the executive mansion as his main base for planning military strategies. His primary goal was always to preserve the Union. It must have been a time of incredible anxiety for the president and his family. Confederate camps were so close they were often visible to the naked eye. Lincoln could look out his second-floor office window and see Confederate flags fluttering across the Potomac. He knew how vulnerable the Capitol was. The Capitol could have been taken if the Confederates had chosen to attack. Lincoln spent many late nights in the House. He often worked in the library and cabinet room. He met constantly with generals and political leaders, trying to figure out how to save the nation. Mary Todd Lincoln, the First Lady, faced strong public criticism. Some people saw her hosting social events during the terrible wartime as inappropriate, but she believed these gatherings were important. She thought they maintained dignity and morale during those dark times. The White House also became a place of deep personal grief for the Lincoln family. Their young son, Willie, died in the house in 1862. Mary Todd Lincoln brought the sick child into what is now the upstairs dining room. That is where he sadly passed away. The burden of the war and this personal loss caused the president to age quickly. The Capitol was so vulnerable at the start of the war that soldiers pitched camp right on the White House grounds. Union troops were even housed inside the White House itself. They were billeted in the East Room, the largest space in the mansion. When Union troops arrived in force, Lincoln was relieved. He reportedly told them, "Thank God you have come, for if you had not, Washington would have been in the hands of the rebels before morning." Lincoln's youngest sons, Willie and Tad, brought life to the house during the war. They were spontaneous and rambunctious kids. They even had a fort built on the roof. They would sometimes burst right into cabinet meetings. Lincoln would welcome them even during serious discussions. They brought a certain youthful energy to the wartime sadness. In 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He signed it in his White House study. This historic act redefined the entire war. It became a moral battle to preserve and redefine the Union. Lincoln now welcomed black leaders and Union soldiers into the White House. This signaled a new era of inclusion for the country. As the Union forces began winning the war, Lincoln started planning for reconciliation. He looked forward to national healing. But his vision was tragically cut short. On April 14, 1865, just a few days after the Confederate surrender, Lincoln was assassinated. He left the White House in his carriage to go to Ford's Theater. He was then brought back dead. The White House was immediately plunged into deep mourning. It was draped in black cloth and filled with silence. The body of Abraham Lincoln lay in state in the East Room. This was nearly 100 years before John F. Kennedy's body would also lie there. The rectangular platform that held Lincoln's coffin, called a catafalque, was later discovered in a vault. The death of Lincoln sanctified the White House. It's not too much to say that Lincoln's presence and tragic end made the house special forever. The White House became a sacred place because Abraham Lincoln lived there. He waged the great moral battle of the Civil War inside its walls. His experience, his wife's problems, and his child's death all happened within that house. After Lincoln's death, the White House household staff had the sad duty of preparing for his funeral. Later, when President Kennedy was assassinated, his wife, Jackie Kennedy, asked her staff to find out how Lincoln was buried. She wanted Kennedy's funeral to be as much like the Lincoln funeral as possible. Vice President Andrew Johnson suddenly assumed the presidency. He faced the enormous task of Reconstruction. Johnson quickly clashed with Congress. They disagreed over how to reunite the nation and protect the rights of freed slaves. The White House became a battleground between executive and legislative power. Johnson's many vetoes and combative style led to his impeachment by the House of Representatives. Though he was acquitted in the Senate, the episode severely damaged the authority of the presidency. The country's fascination with Lincoln's house grew intensely after his death. Shortly after the Civil War ended, the first photographs of the White House became publicly available. By the 1870s, images of Lincoln's house were everywhere. Simply having a picture wasn't enough for many people. Local police records show reports of young ladies being arrested for cutting tassels from White House draperies and chairs. People loved getting close to history. Law-abiding relic hunters could even buy White House furnishings. Items like china, chairs, and carpets were routinely auctioned to raise money for redecorating the house. In 1869, Ulysses S. Grant took office. The former Union general brought some stability to the White House. Grant used his position to support civil rights and Reconstruction policies. He invited black leaders and international diplomats to the White House. During Grant's presidency, the building also saw improvements. Gas lighting replaced candles in the mansion. Modern plumbing systems were expanded throughout the house. However, political scandals and economic troubles weakened Grant's administration. By the mid-1870s, Northern support for Reconstruction was starting to fade. Rutherford B. Hayes entered the White House in 1877 after a highly disputed election. Hayes quickly withdrew federal troops from the South. This effectively ended Reconstruction. Hayes tried to restore the public image of the presidency. He limited political favors and corruption. He also opened the White House to visitors and held receptions to rebuild trust in the government. The White House had survived its greatest crisis. It stood as a witness to the nation's deepest wounds, but also its determined efforts to heal. The House was now defined by the immense personal and national sacrifice that had occurred within its walls. Chapter 6. Technology and Renovation, Gas, Electric Light, and New Plumbing. The President's house had been through fire, Reconstruction, and a Civil War. By the second half of the 1900s, the house stood as a powerful, sacred symbol. But while the building held immense history, it was becoming increasingly outdated in its technology. The late 1800s brought an age of industry and wealth. Presidents had to constantly modernize the mansion to keep up with changing times. These updates included the installation of new heating, plumbing, and lighting systems. The White House hadn't been designed to accommodate these modern conveniences. The original house relied on fireplaces for warmth and candles or oil lamps for light. The large spaces were often difficult to heat and keep lit. One of the first major technological improvements involved lighting. Gas lighting was installed in the 1840s. The gas system required pipes throughout the building and fixtures in the rooms. Gas replaced the less efficient candles and oil lamps. This gave the building better and more reliable lighting. Gas lighting was important for the formal evening events that were part of White House social life. The need for better water and sanitation also drove renovations. Early occupants struggled with the lack of running water and basic plumbing. Even Andrew Jackson had installed running water and new heating systems during his time. Plumbing systems were gradually expanded throughout the house in the 1840s. Indoor plumbing improved sanitation and overall convenience greatly. The White House still required constant maintenance and updating. The mansion showed the effects of continuous occupation and many haphazard modifications. When you needed a new bathroom, you'd often just drill through the timbers and send pipes through. If you needed a sink or wiring, you'd just drill. This kind of wear left the structure riddled with cracked plaster, rotting floors, and faulty wiring. In the 1870s, the executive mansion saw improvements under President Ulysses S. Grant. During his presidency, gas lighting replaced the old candles, and modern plumbing was expanded throughout the mansion. By the 1890s, a major innovation arrived: electric lighting. The White House received electricity during Benjamin Harrison's presidency, but the family was reportedly hesitant about this new technology. President Grover Cleveland and his wife were initially afraid to use the electric switches. They kept the gas lighting as a backup for a while. The installation of electric wiring and fixtures was gradual. The transition from gas to electric lighting took some years to complete throughout the building. In 1891, Ike Hoover arrived at the White House. He was a young electrician who came to help install the first electric lighting. He later became the longest-serving chief usher, managing the house for a third of its life, and serving 10 presidents. The late 1900s also saw a focus on interior design. President Chester A. Arthur renovated the White House interior. He added modern plumbing and new gas fixtures. Arthur also hired Louis Comfort Tiffany to redesign the entrance hall. Tiffany used stained glass and vibrant colors. These changes gave the mansion a more decorative and artistic tone. However, the late 19th century structure was still too small. The presidency was expanding, and the administrative burden was growing. The White House wasn't designed to be a massive office building. But presidents needed space to work. By 1900, President William McKinley and his staff of 23 men were cramped into makeshift offices. These spaces were at the east end of the second floor. They were rooms originally intended to be bedrooms and family quarters. The tension between the building's residential character and its function as an executive office grew strongly. When Theodore Roosevelt took office in 1901, the house was bursting at the seams. Roosevelt had 6 rambunctious children, and the family felt scrunched in the house. There were only about 5 bedrooms for the family and all those children. Roosevelt made major changes. In 1902, he commissioned architect Charles McKim to redesign the interior and expand the office space. The goal was to separate the president's official duties from his family residence. McKim designed a new wing for the staff. This involved demolishing the greenhouses on the west side of the house. This new extension was called the West Wing. On November 5th, 1902, Roosevelt finally had a dedicated place to work. The construction of the West Wing gave the presidency a more professional and organized working environment. Roosevelt was determined to restore the dignity of the house. He removed the excessive Victorian decorations. He restored the neoclassical style of James Hoban's original design. Roosevelt also officially renamed the mansion. The new letterhead, embossed in 1901, read simply, White House, Washington. This made the informal name the official designation. The growth of the executive staff didn't stop there. As the chief executive staff continued to grow, the West Wing was doubled in size. In 1909, William Howard Taft succeeded Roosevelt. Taft continued expanding the presidential workspace. He enlarged the West Wing even more. Taft created the first permanent Oval Office. The original construction of this office was part of the ongoing West Wing expansions. The running joke at the time was that they picked the oval shape by laying the rotund president down on the south lawn and drawing a circle around him. The shape of the office became the embodiment of executive power. By the time Taft left office in 1913, the White House was transformed. It was now both a home and a hub of executive power. The interior and exterior had evolved considerably through 2 decades of technological updates and structural renovations. But even with these major changes, the house was still an old building. The cumulative wear and tear and continuous modifications had taken a toll. By the mid-20th century, the White House was literally falling apart. The house was so stressed that one inspector told President Truman it was staying up from force of habit only. This would lead to the most severe renovation in the house's history. But that would come later. For now, the house entered a new era with modern offices and power concentrated in the newly defined West Wing. Chapter 7. Separating Work from Home, the West Wing and Oval Office. By the end of the 1900s, the President's house was truly struggling to serve its dual purpose. It was both the private home of the President and his family, but it also had to function as the constantly expanding executive office. The building hadn't been designed to be a massive office complex, yet presidents desperately needed space to work. The demands of the growing American government had expanded the administrative burdens on the presidency. By 1900, the tension between the house's residential character and its function as an executive office was very strong. The family residence was rapidly being taken over by government work. President William McKinley had a staff of 23 men cramped into makeshift offices. These offices were on the east end of the second floor. Those rooms were originally intended to be bedrooms and family quarters. The staff was working amidst the noise of telephones, telegraphs, and typewriters. When Theodore Roosevelt took office in 1901, the house was truly bursting at the seams. Roosevelt had 6 energetic children. The family felt scrunched inside the house. There were only about 5 bedrooms for the entire large family. The family needed their home space back. Roosevelt was determined to make major changes to the house. He commissioned the architect Charles McKim to redesign the interior and expand the office space. The main goal was to permanently separate the president's official duties from his private family residence. To create the much-needed new workspace, Roosevelt decided to build a new extension. The construction involved demolishing the greenhouses on the west side of the house. This new extension was formally called the West Wing. On November 5th, 1902, the West Wing was ready. Roosevelt finally had a dedicated place to work. The construction of the West Wing gave the presidency a far more professional and organized working environment. The office space was moved out of the residence and into its own wing. This separation allowed the family to use the residence rooms as they were intended. Roosevelt also worked to restore the dignity of the house. He stripped away the excessive Victorian decorations that had been added over time. He restored the mansion to the elegant neoclassical style of James Hoban's original design. During this renovation, Roosevelt also officially renamed the building. In 1901, he embossed stationery with the term White House. The new letterhead read simply, White House, Washington. This made the informal descriptive name the official designation. The new West Wing was highly successful, but the executive staff continued to grow rapidly. The space quickly became too small. when William Howard Taft succeeded Roosevelt in 1909, he continued to expand the presidential workspace. Taft enlarged the West Wing even more. He used the opportunity to create something entirely new. Taft built the first permanent Oval Office. It's in the West Wing, not in the main house itself. The Oval Office was part of the continuing expansions of the West Wing. The shape of the office became the literal embodiment of American executive power. There was a running joke about how they chose the office's shape. The joke was that architects picked the oval by laying the rotund President Taft down on the south lawn and drawing a circle around him. By the time Taft left office in 1913, the house was truly transformed. It was now both a home and a powerful hub of executive power. The Oval Office quickly gained an aura of power. Presidents are very aware of this feeling. It gives the president the greatest home court advantage that exists. Presidents use the Oval Office to announce crucial decisions and sign landmark bills. They greet their most important guests here. It's the place where presidential power really comes into focus. Later presidents found the Oval Office useful for negotiating. Lyndon B. Johnson used that advantage a lot. He knew that bringing someone into the office would give them a sense of power. This gave Johnson a tremendous advantage in any conversation or negotiation. President Jimmy Carter found it helpful to have visiting leaders approach the Oval Office with some degree of awe and trepidation. This awe came from the aura that naturally surrounded the office as the center of American executive leadership. The historic Resolute desk has been used by many presidents in the Oval Office. It was a gift to President Rutherford B. Hayes from Queen Victoria in 1880. It was crafted from timbers salvaged from a British naval vessel. The desk was moved to various locations in the White House by a number of presidents. First Lady Jackie Kennedy discovered the Resolute desk stashed away in a storage room in 1961. She had it placed in the Oval Office, where it is often found today. Inside the West Wing, President Franklin D. Roosevelt later had a pool built. Roosevelt was stricken by polio, and a daily swim was therapeutic for him. The White House laundry room was converted into an indoor swimming pool for him. The pool's location was between the residence and the West Wing. This gave Roosevelt and his successors a convenient place to relax. The West Wing was not only the center of work, but sometimes a center of fun. President Lyndon B. Johnson was known to interrupt important meetings. He'd order everyone to join him in the pool for a mandatory swim. Later, the swimming pool would be covered over. President Richard Nixon was tired of reporters gathering in the West Wing lobby, so he said they weren't using the pool. Nixon covered the pool over and put the reporters' briefing room in that area. This new room was built right over the swimming pool. The old pool area now holds fiber optic cables and the guts of the TV and radio stations. Most people who have come into the briefing room have signed the walls down in the old pool room. The pool itself is now only a memory. The West Wing and the Oval Office became the central place for presidential power. The White House was now structured to handle the vast responsibilities of the modern presidency. It was no longer just the president's home. The separation of the working spaces from the family's private quarters helped the first families maintain some sense of a normal life upstairs. The house was now divided. The official residence remained for living, and the West Wing became the engine of executive government. Chapter 8. Wartime Command Center and the Structural Gutting. The first decades of the 1900s saw the White House become a true working complex. Theodore Roosevelt's addition of the West Wing separated the president's office from the family residence. This change was necessary because the administrative demands of the growing government were increasing. However, the changes and expansions did not stop the march of global crisis. When World War I erupted in Europe in 1914, President Woodrow Wilson initially kept the United States neutral. Inside the White House, Wilson wrestled with mounting pressure from both allies and the public. After repeated German provocations in 1917, Wilson asked Congress to declare war. The White House quickly transformed into a command center. It was used for mobilizing the American economy and military during the conflict. Wilson signed key wartime legislation from his desk. He addressed the nation from the East Room, which was often used for public announcements. After the war, Wilson crafted his vision for post-war peace, the 14 points, inside the mansion. The White House saw a return to grand social events after the war, but this peace was short-lived. The Great Depression soon enveloped the nation. In 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt took office, bringing bold leadership. Roosevelt, despite being paralyzed from polio, exuded confidence and optimism from within the mansion. Roosevelt used the White House as a critical tool for communication. He held his famous fireside chats over the radio, directly addressing the American people from the White House. The mansion became the center of his sweeping economic reforms and relief programs, known as the New Deal. As World War II erupted, the White House once again shifted into wartime mode. The building was no longer just a home. It became the global nerve center of American power. Roosevelt and his aides quickly scrambled to protect the structure. The White House became tightly secured. Blackout curtains were placed on the windows. Air raid drills became routine events. People could no longer picnic on the lawn or come right into the White House. New sentry boxes were created by the Secret Service at that time. Roosevelt established the White House Map Room. He used this room to monitor global developments. The president held secret meetings with military leaders and foreign diplomats. One famous visitor was British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Churchill stayed at the White House for Christmas in 1941. His visit undid the whole rhythm of the house. Churchill had roaming rights of the White House. The chief butler at the time, Alonzo Fields, dealt with Churchill's specific requests. Churchill asked the butler for scotch and soda before lunch. He wanted 90-year-old brandy and French champagne before going to sleep at night. Roosevelt expanded the West Wing even further to accommodate new offices and war councils. Even with failing health, Roosevelt continued to lead the Allied strategy from inside the White House. On April 12, 1945, just months before the war ended, Franklin D. Roosevelt died in office. Vice President Harry S. Truman was suddenly sworn in. A stunned Truman was urgently summoned to the White House cabinet room. When he arrived, Eleanor Roosevelt told him the news. She said, "Harry, the president is dead." When Truman asked what he could do, Mrs. Roosevelt replied, "Is there anything we can do for you, Harry? For you are the one in trouble now." Truman inherited the immense weight of global conflict. The White House entered the atomic age as Truman authorized the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war ended later that year, and the executive mansion shifted from war to peace. After World War II, the White House became the epicenter of Cold War decisions. Truman faced mounting tensions with the Soviet Union. He responded with the Truman Doctrine, committing American support to nations resisting communism. Inside the White House, key meetings laid the groundwork for the Marshall Plan. Truman approved the formation of NATO while working from the Oval Office, but the White House itself was failing. The building was showing its age after decades of wear and tear. It had been used hard for over 150 years. The cumulative impact of haphazard modifications had taken a toll. The structure was riddled with cracked plaster, rotting floors, and faulty wiring. When people needed a new bathroom, they'd often just drill through the timbers and send pipes through. If they needed a sink or wiring, they'd drill, drill, drill. This left the structure like a cheese with holes. Plaster would powder down from the chandeliers. At one point, one of the chandeliers jumped down a few links on the chain. The house was literally falling apart. The engineering report in 1948 was bleak. One inspector told the president the house was staying up from force of habit only. A shocking incident occurred in 1948. Truman's daughter, Margaret, was playing the piano upstairs in the private quarters. To her horror, the leg of her piano punched through the floor. It went through to the family dining room below. The White House had reached the breaking point. Some people suggested tearing down the White House completely. They wanted to replace the old building with a modern, efficient substitute. To his everlasting credit, Harry Truman had a great sense of history. He said no to demolition. Truman was working on sacred ground, and he knew he had to save the old house. He would build a new one in its place. President Truman took freshman Congressman Gerald Ford on a tour to show them the extent of the problem. Ford recalled Truman taking them into the East Room. Truman pointed to a corner where the ceiling had sagged 18 inches. Truman said he wouldn't stay there with his family under any circumstances. In 1947, the Trumans moved out of the house. They moved across the street to Blair House. Not since 1814, when the Madisons retreated from the British, had a president been forced to abandon the White House. Construction work began in late 1949. The project was scheduled to take 2 years and cost $5.5 million. Of course, it ended up taking 3 years instead of 2. It also went way over budget. The White House underwent a complete interior reconstruction. The inside was completely gutted down to the studs. Workers saved the doors, fireplace mantels, and windows before the gutting began. Truman insisted on preserving the building's original exterior walls. He saw them as a crucial link to the past and a symbol of American resilience. The steel frame was built inside the 4 walls. The walls were about all that really remained. Workers rebuilt the interior with new steel beams and concrete. They coped the detail they couldn't remove as they rebuilt. The new construction used a steel frame instead of wood. The inside of the house was put back exactly as before. Jefferson and Lincoln would have easily recognized their old home. Much of the old lumber was preserved and turned into paneling in a number of rooms. The idea of the house and the symbol was considered bigger than any material part of it. Truman, who was a high-ranking Mason, inspected the gutting daily. He loved building. He wanted to knock down a basement door to make it wide enough for a bulldozer and a dump truck. When the workers asked him to approve, he said no. He wouldn't have it. So they had to take the dump truck and the bulldozer apart. They reconstructed them inside so they could dig out the basement. He was resolute in saving the house that George Washington had built. In the spring of 1952, President Truman showed off the refurbished White House on national television. He estimated the house wouldn't need another renovation for about 1,000 years. He also sent stones from the renovation to various Masonic Grand Lodges throughout the country. These stones, which had Masonic marks on them, were a gesture of sharing the house's history. President Truman's reconstruction restored the house to be structurally sound. It finally had a modern structure inside the historic shell. The house was now ready to face the demands of the modern presidency, structurally supported by steel and concrete. Chapter 9. Jackie Kennedy's Restoration and Cold War Decisions. The massive Truman renovation had saved the White House from structural collapse. It was now structurally sound. supported by a steel frame inside the original stone walls. In 1953, Dwight D. Eisenhower took office, bringing military discipline to the White House. Eisenhower used the House as a command post during key Cold War moments. These moments included the Korean Armistice and the Suez Crisis. Eisenhower also opened the White House to public tours and held televised addresses. The first official White House press room was established during his presidency. In 1960, John F. Kennedy was elected. Kennedy and his wife Jacqueline Kennedy brought a youthful energy to the executive mansion. The White House had been structurally restored, but its interior furnishings and decorations were still a problem. Jacqueline Kennedy had toured the White House as a child and remembered feeling strangely let down by what she saw. When she moved in 1961, she felt the house was decorated in a random mix of periods and styles. She complained that it looked like it'd been furnished by discount stores. She said there wasn't any trace of the past in the house. Much of the furniture had been supplied at cost by a New York department store. Jacqueline Kennedy was determined to give the White House a thorough makeover. She set out to restore the White House interiors with historic furniture and art. Her goal was to make the White House a showcase for American design. She wanted the rooms arranged to reflect the evolution of the nation's style and taste. She formed a fine arts committee to help guide her acquisition of period furnishings from America's past. She also invited collectors to donate their antique treasures to the house. Mrs. Kennedy also created the position of the curator of the White House. This position was created unofficially by her. She made certain that the house's collections would be cared for by experts. The collection isn't stored behind ropes or under glass. Guests come in and sit on the furniture and walk on the carpets and eat off the china. This allows the public to go into the rooms where the president does his job. On February 14th, 1962, Jackie Kennedy opened her home to the American public on primetime television. She was soft-spoken, poised, and charming. She said that this house will always grow, and it should. The ratings for the broadcast were staggering. More than 80 million Americans tuned in to watch the tour. That was nearly half the country. Jackie Kennedy wanted to honor and preserve the legacy of the president's home. Jackie Kennedy was also responsible for the current location of the historic Resolute Desk. This desk was a gift from Queen Victoria to President Rutherford B. Hayes in 1880. It was crafted from timbers salvaged from a British naval vessel. A number of presidents had moved the desk to various locations in the White House. Jackie Kennedy discovered it stashed away in a storage room in 1961. She had it placed in the Oval Office, where it is often found today. While Jackie Kennedy worked on the interior, her husband, John F. Kennedy, was making critical Cold War decisions. The White House, now structurally secure, was the nerve center for global crisis management. In 1962, Kennedy held frequent meetings in the Cabinet Room during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The mansion became the nerve center as the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. Kennedy addressed the nation live from the Oval Office, urging calm and resolve. The successful resolution of the crisis elevated the White House's image as a symbol of global leadership. Kennedy also welcomed civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. into the White House. These meetings laid the groundwork for federal action on civil rights. The White House was the place where civil rights and global crises were dealt with simultaneously. Tragedy struck on November 22, 1963, when JFK was assassinated. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in aboard Air Force One. He returned to Washington to lead a grieving nation. The White House was immediately plunged into mourning. The staff had the sad duty of preparing for his funeral. On the flight back from Dallas, the First Lady asked her staff to find out how Lincoln was buried. Mrs. Kennedy's secretary, Mary Gallagher, called the archives. She said Mrs. Kennedy wanted the funeral as much like the Lincoln funeral as possible. Staffers found the old plans in the National Archives. In a vault in the basement of the Capitol, they discovered a rectangular platform. This platform, called a catafalque, was believed to be the one on which Lincoln's coffin had rested. It had held everyone from Lincoln's body to John F. Kennedy's body to Ronald Reagan's bodies. A military honor guard carried Kennedy's casket to the East Room. Abraham Lincoln's body had lain there nearly 100 years earlier. Lyndon B. Johnson returned to the White House and used his time there for rapid legislative activity. Johnson used the East Room to sign the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He signed these historic laws with civil rights leaders by his side. Johnson also expanded the Great Society programs from within the mansion's walls. Johnson was known for his highly personal and intense use of the Oval Office. He knew that bringing someone into the office would give them a sense of power. This gave him a tremendous advantage in any negotiation or conversation. He used the Oval Office to announce crucial decisions and sign landmark bills. He also hosted war councils during the escalating Vietnam conflict. He often paced the halls late at night, burdened by the war. The White House was not just a symbol of power. It became a place of controversy. Protests erupted outside the White House as public opinion on Vietnam shifted. Anti-war demonstrations filled Lafayette Square across the street. Inside, Johnson decided not to seek re-election. He was exhausted by the burdens of war and social unrest. The House was constantly adapting. During the Roosevelt administration, the White House laundry room was converted into an indoor swimming pool. This pool was located in the west gallery between the residence and the West Wing. Johnson was known to interrupt important meetings. He'd order everyone to join him in the pool for a mandatory swim. But Richard Nixon, who took office in 1969, had different ideas. Nixon grew tired of reporters gathering in the West Wing lobby. He covered the pool over and put the reporters' briefing room in that area. The new briefing room was built right over the swimming pool. The old pool area now holds miles of fiber optic cables and the guts of the TV and radio stations. Most people who have come into the briefing room have signed the walls down in the old pool room. The White House also faced scandal in the 1970s under President Richard Nixon. The mansion became the focal point of the Watergate scandal. Secret recordings made in the Oval Office later became central evidence. In August 1974, Nixon became the first president to resign. Vice President Gerald Ford assumed office and declared, "Our long national nightmare is over," from the East Room. By the end of this era, the White House was both a historic symbol and a battleground for policy and protest. The House continued to be a place of intense historical meaning. It was a place where presidents lived and worked, facing their greatest challenges. Chapter 10. Security, Protests, and the Modern Presidency. The Truman renovation of the White House had given the old building a new steel skeleton. It was structurally sound and ready for the demands of the modern era. The White House was now set to become the global nerve center for Cold War decision-making. The House had survived crisis and rebirth, but the biggest changes of the late 20th century would relate to security and technology. In 1960, John F. Kennedy was elected, followed by Lyndon B. Johnson. The House was immediately faced with managing major global crises. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 centered the world's attention on the White House. Kennedy held frequent meetings in the cabinet room. The world stood on the brink of nuclear war. Kennedy addressed the nation live from the Oval Office to urge calm and resolve. The successful handling of the crisis elevated the White House's image as a symbol of global leadership. Yet the House soon faced controversy. As the Vietnam conflict escalated, war councils were hosted inside the mansion's walls. Protests began erupting outside the House. Anti-war demonstrations filled Lafayette Square, which is right across the street. The House was not just a symbol of power, it became a place of bitter controversy. Inside, Lyndon B. Johnson decided not to seek re-election. He was exhausted by the heavy burdens of war and social unrest. This turmoil showed that even the home of the president could become a battleground for policy and protest. In 1969, Richard Nixon took office. His administration soon saw the White House become the focus of the Watergate scandal. Secret recordings made in the Oval Office later became central evidence in the investigation. The nation watched as trust in the presidency declined. In August 1974, Nixon became the first president to resign. He announced it from the White House. He then boarded a helicopter on the South Lawn, waving farewell in a somber moment. The press also saw major changes during this era. The White House had first received reporters in the West Wing under Theodore Roosevelt. Franklin D. Roosevelt later enlarged the press office, but Nixon grew tired of reporters gathering in the West Wing lobby. He covered the old swimming pool over and built a new briefing room in that area. The new briefing room was right over the swimming pool. The old pool area now holds fiber optic cables and the guts of the television and radio stations. Most people who visit the briefing room have signed the walls down in the old pool room. The Nixon administration made it clear they viewed the press as hostile and dangerous. Reporters were moved away from the Oval Office into this new corral. The White House staff made it clear that reporters needed an escort to go anywhere else. The White House faced new security challenges as the 20th century came to a close. In the spring of 1995, Pennsylvania Avenue, the street right in front of the White House, was closed forever. This happened after a serious incident in 1994. President Clinton agreed to close off the street to all non-pedestrian traffic. This was done to keep the House safe and secure. This decision made the White House a little more fortress and a little less open house. Security around the House had been increasing for decades. New sentry boxes were created by the Secret Service during World War II. Eisenhower's first official White House press room was established during his presidency. The House was increasingly becoming a place where public access was difficult. It had been an accessible place for decades. Up until World War II, visitors could walk right in and wander through the state floor parlors. Now, the House was strictly controlled. The September 11, 2001 attacks marked a permanent shift in White House security. The White House became tightly secured. Concrete barriers, sharpshooters, and restricted airspace became standard. President George W. Bush addressed the nation from the Oval Office. The White House became a command center during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. On the day of the attacks, the White House staff was preparing for a huge congressional barbecue. The chief usher had to quickly evacuate the offices in the West Wing. Vice President Cheney and other top officials took refuge underground. This hidden bunker is called the Presidential Emergency Operational Center. It was built to withstand a nuclear attack. The White House staff, however, remained on the job during the crisis. One chief usher and a few members of his staff worked to clear the south grounds. This was done so the presidential helicopter could land there. They knew the president wouldn't be satisfied talking from a bunker somewhere. He would want to address the nation from the Oval Office. The president's address from the Oval Office restored a sense of normalcy for the nation. Despite the security concerns, the tradition of protest could not be denied. Citizens are still free to make their voices heard within earshot of the Oval Office. Protests were constant during the Vietnam War, sometimes occurring almost every night. President Lyndon B. Johnson believed strongly in preserving the right to dissent. Modern presidents often struggle with the feeling of being trapped inside the White House. President Truman famously called it the Great White Jail. He lamented that the old place cracked and popped all night long. He said, why anyone would want to come back here he couldn't understand. It was a nice prison, but a prison nevertheless. President Bill Clinton called the White House the crown jewel of the federal penal system. Presidents still try hard to break out of what President Obama called the bubble. Theodore Roosevelt used to go camping in Yellowstone for a month. He wouldn't tell anybody where he was going. Harry Truman used to take daily walks outside. Sometimes a president will take an unscheduled walk from the White House. It's a rare moment of spontaneity. Technological upgrades became common in the 1990s under President Bill Clinton. The White House saw the introduction of email systems. It also adapted to the digital age under President Joe Biden, with live stream briefings and remote events. The mansion became the stage for frequent social media announcements under Donald Trump. The White House remains the enduring symbol of American democracy. Its walls hold the stories of presidents, protests, and pivotal decisions. It is a symbol of American heritage. The House continues to be a living, breathing place that is changing every minute. It connects the present to the past tangibly. The White House is a home on loan from the nation to its leader. It's a building that will continue to evolve and adapt indefinitely. The structure remains functional and relevant, serving its original purpose over 2 centuries later. Chapter 11: East Wing Demolition and Ballroom Construction. The president had been speaking for quite some time about building a large and beautiful ballroom at the White House complex. He often said that this new space was long needed there. He had previously promised that his plans for the ballroom would not interfere with the current building. He insisted that the new addition would be near the existing structure, but would not touch it. He stated that he was the biggest fan of the existing building and would pay total respect to it. But the rapid speed of the teardown that followed surprised many people. On a Monday, images showed heavy construction equipment tearing into the facade of the East Wing. By Thursday of that same week, the East Wing was leveled. This work was accomplished with great speed, or what some called lightning speed. The president explained that after a tremendous amount of study with expert architects, they decided to knock down the East Wing. He noted that the East Wing wasn't really much left of the original structure. He said that it had been changed over 100 years. He pointed out that columns had been removed and a story was added in 1948 or 1949. He believed that keeping the old structure would only hurt the very expensive and beautiful new building planned for the site. The demolition was driven in part by cost and efficiency. The contracting and engineering teams advised that it would be much cheaper and faster just to tear down the East Wing completely. The president asked the contracting team if they could perform the demolition at night. The underlying thought was that Washington would wake up in the morning and the East Wing would have simply evaporated. This tactic is known to real estate developers. Once a structure is demolished, it creates a fait accompli. This shifts the momentum entirely toward rebuilding, as nobody can undo the change. The East Wing had been primarily used for the First Lady's offices, her staff, and for social functions. The destruction of this wing, sometimes referred to as the women's part of the White House, was viewed with sadness by some. One former staff member felt sentimental and heartbroken about the loss of their office overlooking the South Lawn. Critics emphasized that the swift process of demolition showed a lack of respect for the White House as a historic icon. They suggested the approach reflected the president's business method of demolishing first and dealing with the consequences later. The new ballroom project is planned to be massive in scale. It is projected to be about 90,000 square feet. It is intended to host meetings of foreign leaders and state dinners. The president stated that the finished result would be one of the great ballrooms anywhere in the world. The new scale is considered massively out of proportion to the original executive residence. The White House was originally built to be roughly 54,000 square feet. The proposed addition is nearly double that size. The Founding Fathers deliberately built the White House to scale, making it a house for a president rather than a European-style palace. The large, opulent design is considered contrary to American democratic ideals of simplicity and virtue. The style is widely criticized for being garish, opulent, tacky, and excessive. The architectural style has been called gaudy and banal. Critics suggested it resembles a Marriott hotel ballroom and lacks the dignity appropriate for the White House. The design is reportedly modeled directly after the Mar-a-Lago resort. The demolition of the East Wing also brought attention to a deeply buried structure beneath it. This location housed the President's Emergency Operations Center, or PEOC. This facility is a deep underground bunker that was built to withstand a nuclear attack. It is known as the safest spot in the entire executive mansion. It is suggested that the president wants to renovate and expand this bunker beneath the new ballroom. The military is reportedly involved in the project to ensure everything is perfect, which could be related to the fortified nature of the site. The financial side of the construction project drew significant public debate. The estimated cost of the construction was raised to about $300 million. The president assured the public that the government would pay absolutely nothing. He claimed the entire project would be paid for 100% by himself and his donors. Corporations and high-profile donors listed as contributors include Lockheed Martin, Booz Allen Hamilton, and Stephen Schwarzman. The decision to proceed with this expensive project during a government shutdown was criticized. It was noted that this construction was happening while food assistance, known as SNAP benefits, for poor families was under threat of being cut off. Critics suggested that the swift demolition was intended as a major distraction. The demolition began right as an important book concerning Jeffrey Epstein was scheduled for release. Because the ballroom is modeled after Mar-a-Lago, where Epstein partied with the president, some suggested that the new structure should be branded the Epstein Ballroom. This name links the ballroom to the controversy and highlights the administration's attempt to divert the news cycle. The current construction has been compared to previous major White House renovations, especially the work done by President Truman. Truman's extensive gutting of the White House in the 1940s was necessitated by structural concerns because the building was literally falling apart. Truman's work was done to save the building. In contrast, critics argued that the current destruction of the East Wing was unnecessary and lacked the proper consultation that normally governs changes to Washington's monuments. The White House press secretary defended the construction by stating that many presidents have made their mark on the complex. She also mentioned that previous modifications, like the creation of the current press briefing room, were built over a former swimming pool. She argued that the East Wing would become more beautiful and modern, and the ballroom would serve generations of state visits and large parties. Some debate centered on the permanence of the new structure. Future leaders have the ability to change the decor and furnishings. Architectural critics suggested that the ballroom, due to its destructive nature and lack of artistic merit, should likely be demolished by a future administration to restore the modest nature of the complex. However, there is another perspective that argues against erasing this chapter of history. This view suggests that even if the architecture is terrible, the structure should remain standing as a powerful reminder. This architectural record would teach future generations about a time when the country may have lost its way. This idea promotes accepting the complexity of history rather than denying it. Thank you for joining me on this quiet journey through the history of the White House. If you found comfort here, or if this story helped you relax, please take a moment to like this video. It helps more than you might think, especially with how the YouTube algorithm decides what to share with others. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this about the hidden corners of American history, consider subscribing. I'll be posting new videos every week, so there will always be another story waiting for you at bedtime. Now rest easy, knowing the tour is complete. The lights of the White House still glow through the night, a silent reminder of every life and memory that passed through its halls. Sleep well, and may your dreams be peaceful and bright. And if you're still awake, that's perfectly fine. Let your breathing slow, let your body rest, and know that the next story will be here waiting for you soon.